Good evening. It's Thursday night on Southern Sports Gumbo, where we talk high school football, a little bit of college, with some games this weekend. We're going to talk some spread games tonight, and obviously our coach is on the hot seat, which we've been, we haven't been the best with some of our picks. But one thing about it, if we have put a coach on the hot seat, that hot seat is burned up, as we have seen Brent Pry, Mike Gundy, and Sam Pittman all bite that hot seat bullet. And so our coaches this week that we've already at one point in time talked about him being on the hot seat on our show, and that is Trent Dilfer from UAB, Billy Napier from Florida, and Luke Fickle from Wisconsin. So the question is, this week is one of these coaches have that hot seat burn all the way through it, and they meet the ultimate end of their college job that they're in right now. And so I'll go ahead and I think Luke Fickle bites the bullet. There's a lot of controversy in Wisconsin about him and getting him being able to get the job done. They've not just lost this year; they've been beaten pretty badly. I think Michigan runs through them again. So give me Luke Fickle as his hot seat burning up this weekend. DMAC, who do you have? And you don't have to pick one of those three, but those are the three that to me are the burning the hottest.
Yeah, I'm gonna roll with Billy Napier over at Florida as this being his last week as the Florida Gators head coach. They've looked absolutely horrendous, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and I don't think that gets any better against a pretty stout Texas defense. So I think the defense at Florida is the reason he's kept his job this long this year. But I think Arch Manning gets a few things going, and yeah, they win by 10 plus in this one, so it's goodbye Billy this week. What do you think, Brian?
Man, I got to believe that Billy Napier is going to be shut down like the United States government this week. I think I really do believe Texas is going to beat them like a drum this week, and I think this is going to be the death knell for Sunbelt Billy. I think he's going to be headed back to the Sunbelt next season. What do you think there, Sweets?
I'm with you guys on Napier, but I'm going to go ahead and throw Mark Stoops out there. I think Stoops is a decent coach. He was part of the LSU search a few years back originally. I just think his time is due at Kentucky. He just hasn't been able to get it going this year. And I think that a loss this weekend puts him on the track. So mark me down for Stoops on the hot seat if they lose this one. What do we got to go next, D-Mac?
Yeah, so we're gonna do picks of the week. So I'm gonna give one underdog that I like and one favorite that I like this week. So underdog, I'm rolling with the Fighting Pavias at Vanderbilt to cover, getting 10.5. I think they win this game. And then my favorite to cover is Clemson this week, giving 14.5. I think Clemson's got to get on the right track at some point this season, and I think it starts this week for them. Who do you have?
So for my dog of the week, I really like this one. I like the Mississippi State Bulldogs going to Texas A&M and making this a fight, just like they did last weekend against Tennessee. And I don't think they'll be discouraged by that loss. I think they'll actually pick up some momentum from the fact that they played Tennessee to the wire. They've already beat Arizona State. They're getting 16.5 points. So give me Mississippi State to keep this game. I like it probably even within 10 or less against Texas A&M. A&M will probably win the game, but I think Mississippi State will fight them all the way to the end. On the other side of it, from a team that from giving points, and we're going to start, kind of keeping up with these with each other. I really like Baylor at home with Dave Aranda against Kansas State. Kansas State's kind of had a tough year so far. They're 2-3. Baylor's a 6.5 point favorite. I know Baylor doesn't have the best defense, but they did win by 18 last week in Stillwater against Oklahoma State. I think they come home. Baylor's still fighting in that conference to be in the Big 12 championship, and so I think they'll beat K State uh, by at least 2 touchdowns this weekend. Who do you have?
Well, for my dog of the week, I'm going with the Central Florida at home, a home dog against the Kansas Jayhawks. Kansas has given up 4.5 in this game, and I just think it's going to be decided by 1 point by field goal. So I'm looking for Central Florida to cover in this game, and I really like them to actually win outright. And then my favorite of the week are the Michigan Wolverines. I'm not a big Michigan fan, but I look at this matchup. They're 17.5-point favorites over Wisconsin at home. Wisconsin is just reeling. I just don't like this team at all. I just don't think they're competitive, and I think Underwood, especially if Underwood gets started fast in the first quarter, this could roll downhill and be a 30-point plus game. So I like Michigan over Wisconsin at home. Sweet, who you got?
My dog of the week is the Florida State Seminoles. They're getting 4.5 at home against Miami. Talked about this the other night. Castellanos with his feet is going to give Miami's defense fits. They don't cover. They win the game as well. I just think this is that one game a year that Cristobal is going to spit the bit on. And then for my favorite of the week, I like Georgia getting 20 or laying 20.5 against Kentucky here. Stoops is on the hot seat. Georgia beating them by 30 plus is going to be where the hammer meets the nail. So give me Georgia minus the 20.5 and Stoops swan song at Kentucky. Where are we going next? Where are we going next, Kev?
Well, we were going to also kind of talk about some high school football before we get into this weekend. A little bit more with college games, and so let's let Brian start us off with Louisiana high school football. He's got some good games there this week.
Yes, this week there's one particular game that everybody's talking about and previewing, and that's New Orleans Catholic League game that's happening Friday night with 5A number 1 Edna Carr playing against 5A number 4 St. Augustine. No secret, Edna Carr is the class of Louisiana this season and has been built up clout nationally at number 14 in the National High School Top 300 poll. For St. Aug and Coach Robert Valdez, who came home from Alabama to take this head coaching job at high school, and saw a really great interview with him this week where he talked about the reasons why he came home. He wanted to be a grandfather, be near his grandkids. His mom and dad were getting older. He wanted to be able to take care of them. And he also enjoys the Catholic League, coaching in the Catholic League. And who can blame him, man? But this matchup, man, a good offensive team of St. Aug trying to move the ball against probably one of the top 5 defenses in the entire nation in Carr. Nowhere else do you start with Carr other than 5-star defensive tackle Richard Anderson, who's an LSU commit. I mean, you got a kid in high school who's 6'3", 340 pounds, and can move like he does. Against high school kids, against 250-pound offensive linemen, it's a mismatch. But then you think about 4-star Aiden Hall, who's a safety, playing in Carr's secondary alongside cornerback Maurice Williams, who's also a 4-star. That's the problem St. Aug faces in this game. Carr has given up 20 points in 4 games this year. 17 of those came against American Heritage out of Florida. So they've given up a total of 3 points against the other 3 Louisiana teams they played. And they didn't play, Sisters of the Poor. They were really good teams they played. But meanwhile, St. Aug is averaging 56 points a game behind the play of wide receivers Miguel Whitley, who's a 2027 recruit, and Raekwon Williams, who's a 2026 recruit. And then they have a really great quarterback named Vashon Kuon, who's getting them the ball downfield. So Purple Knights are a good story this year, and it could very well make the Superdome this season, but they'll have to go through Carr and maybe twice. So I don't see them keeping the game close. I think Carr pulls away late and wins this one by about 21 points. My crazy matchup of the week, Bossier Airline against Captain Shreve in the Shreveport District in District 15A. It has been said that the next time defenses played in Shreveport will be the first time. The last year's District 15A matchup, Airline won, get this, 69-68 in a regulation high school game. In 2023, Captain Shreve flipped it around and won 60-35. So both teams have high-octane offenses led by top wide receiver in Louisiana, LSU commit Kenny Darby, who plays at Airline. And if you guys are looking at this in high school terms, if you have the total at 100 for this game, you may want to take the over. I think Airline flies past Captain Shreve this week in a score of 56-52. And I'm kind of maybe undershooting this one. In the We're Not Catholic League, but we can play football in the land of cotton game of the week is Ouachita High School playing against Franklin Parish. Now it's intriguing to me because you got little bitty old Winsboro, Louisiana, in the middle of nowhere in Franklin Parish, hosting the 5A Lions, but it won't be lacking star power. LSU commit Des Ellis leads the 4A Patriots at quarterback, but they also have guys like defensive lineman Tavon Bell, who's committed to Texas State, 2027 running back Trey Martin, who this week received an offer from LSU. And then you also got Washita, who is led by 2026 Texas defensive lineman commit Dylan Berryman, and quarterback Montrell Connor, who may be one of the most dynamic playmakers in North Louisiana playing quarterback. He's a little bit undersized. Yeah, he's probably 5'7", about 160 pounds, but the guy is just electric. Washita is 4-0 heading into this game, and they're undefeated for the first time in 2 decades. And Franklin Parish, of course, beat them last year in a Week 5 game. But I'm going to say give me Washita in a close one with defense winning out at the end in 30-28. Couple of other games that are on the slate. I won't get too heavy into these, but Sterlington, who's the 3A, the number 3 team in 3A, will be at Neville, who's the number 11 team in 5A. Sterlington is the defending Division III non-select champion. Neville lost in the Division I non-select semifinals last year. Then you got Jules Sumner, who's Class 3A number 1, versus Franklinton, who's Class 4A number 5. Franklinton happens to be the defending Division II non-select champions. And then my last one, last two, we got St. Charles Catholic, who's a 4A number 7, will be taking on St. James, which is the 3A number 2. And then last but not least, we got Ruston, who's the Class 5A number 2, traveling to Longview, Texas to play Stephenville, Texas, who is the 4A number 4 team in Texas. So that should be a good one. Then I got my underrated quarterback matchup of the week is actually about, they may have kicked off already. This is tonight's Thursday matchup between Benton and Leesville. The two quarterbacks, Malachi Ziegler from Benton and Trell Broom from Leesville, have combined to pass for 2,000 yards and 15 touchdowns in their first 4 games. So those guys may be lighting it up tonight. And then last but not least, my shout out of the week to 2 guys, Javon Vital, who is an athlete in class of 2027 from Hamilton Christian in Lake Charles. Last week rushed 15 times for 362 yards and 5 touchdowns, passed for another 134 yards, and then added a 98-yard punt return for a touchdown in a 48-13 win. My other shout-out goes to Christian Pawnee, a throwback guy. And if you guys remember, what's the guy, Tommy, played at LSU from West Monroe, big fullback, played, anyway, name escapes me, but Christian Pawnee, class of 2026 power back at West Monroe, had 144 yards, 26 carries, and 2 touchdowns, and a huge win over Class 5A number 2 Catholic of Baton Rouge last week. A huge win for West Monroe, kind of puts them back into the conversation among the elite teams in Louisiana. So, and that's what I got. Kevin, what do you got in the Georgia region?
So I'm just going to go into 2 games from a simplistic standpoint. Again, in Georgia, there's a lot of top teams that are playing teams that are kind of in the middle of the road. 2 games that I saw that stuck out to me were Cartersville on the road at Cass this week. Cass only has 1 loss. Cartersville's undefeated and playing really well. So that's a game that I think Cass is a team that I think that could sneak up and beat Cartersville. I think that's a game to watch. And then Valdosta and Colquitt County. Larry might want to talk about that one too in the southern part of the state. That's 2 teams that always perform well in the southern part of the state. So it's an interesting matchup just to see which one of those teams could maybe kind of stamp themselves as the team that might come out of the southern part of the state to compete for a state championship against either Buford, Grayson, or Carrollton in that top 6A group from Georgia. So, Sweet, you got, again, you may have some thoughts on that last game. I also know there's a game that's really close to your heart that you may care about this week with that Marietta-Walton game. Walton's not what they were 2 years ago, but that could be an interesting game right there in your backyard. So, what's your thoughts this week?
Yeah, that's the game I'm going to, Kevin, is Marietta at Walton. Marietta's 2-0 in region. They started off 0-4 in non-region play, but have won their first 2 region tilts. Playing great, moving the ball offensively. Walton is 3-3 overall, 1-1 in region. Marietta's offense is led by Samaj Anderson, who had 142 yards receiving in their last game with 2 touchdowns, and quarterback Jaden Whiteside, who's averaging over 200 yards a game throwing the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, Jameen Solomon's averaging 7.2 tackles a game, and linebacker Alec Huff is averaging 6.8 tackles a game. Marietta's getting it done across the board. For Walton, Walton has Noriega Thompson, who's rushing for 93 yards a game. He's also plays strong safety. And Jordan Peacock, who's averaging 62 yards a game as a receiver, a freshman receiver, I'll add. Great talent there. Noah Lavalley, a senior middle linebacker, leads Walton, averaging 14.7 tackles a game. This important game in Region 5, and the winner of it will have a leg up, especially in head-to-head for seedings. Walton is a slight favorite here, but I like Marietta to go in there and get an upset tomorrow night in that game. What do you got, D-Mac?
Yeah, so I'm going to start off in Alabama this week and then wrap up with another Louisiana game. So you've got Thompson and Hewitt Trustful in Alabama, number 1 team in state versus number 3. And Thompson's got some really good guys. Cam Pritchett, he's a 4-star defensive lineman committed to Oregon. Trent Seaborn, their quarterback, is likely heading to Alabama. So they've got some really good guys on that side of the ball. But Hewitt, another really good team. They've got a really good wide receiver in Dylan Cope, who's heading to Virginia. And then I always mess up his name, Delvecchio Alston, a running back for them. He's heading to Kentucky, so they've got some talent on that team as well. So, going to be a really good game. I'm going to take Thompson in a close one in this one. So, my next game is Central out of Phoenix City in Alabama going up against Auburn this week. So, same thing with Central. Jatori Williams, offensive lineman, committed to Alabama on their side of the ball, and then Bobby Coleman, class of 27 quarterback, is a really talented guy, really good dual threat quarterback. So Auburn's going to have their hands full in this one. Auburn is also, I know 2 weeks ago they were talking about benching their starting quarterback, who is a 4-star, in favor of a younger guy. He showed up last week in their game against Moody, and they ended up winning 41-7. So I think he's got his job back, some security around that, and he's likely a Auburn commit in the class of 27. 2 really good games. I think Central out of Phoenix City pulls this one off. Yeah, I think it's not going to be as close as some people think. I think Central can win this one in that 14-point range. So we move over to Baton Rouge. I know Brian talked earlier, West Monroe had a big win over Catholic High last week. Catholic High is now ranked number 5 in the state of Louisiana, and they're taking on Madison Ridgeland Academy out of the Jackson area of the Mississippi, who's ranked 3rd in the state of Mississippi. So this game's going to be played in Baton Rouge, and it's the game that I'm going to this week. Catholic's headlined by Blaine Bradford, 4-star safety, who's committed to Ohio State that LSU is desperately trying to flip. And they've got a really good class of 27 running back in Jaden Miles. MRA doesn't have nearly the guys on paper that Catholic High has, but a sophomore that I want to point out, Colson O'Kane, running back for MRA, has 13 touchdowns so far this season. So he's a really talented young guy. I was lucky enough to go to Catholic, and then when I transferred out and played basketball at a smaller school, we played a lot of Mississippi teams, and MRA was a team we played 4 or 5 times a year. So know both of these schools really well, but I think Catholic runs away with this one in the second half, just from the amount of dudes they have on their team. So I like Catholic to win this one. I'm going to go 42-24. Big win for Catholic High. They need to get things right after losing to West Monroe last week. So that's my high school takes for the week.
D-Mac, you
one more
mentioned
game,
Bobby
one more.
Coleman in Phoenix City.
The one game I did want to touch on, Valdosta traveling over to Colquitt. Valdosta is 6-0 in the state of Georgia. They're ranked top 5 in the state. Colquitt is 4-2. They're led by running back Jai Lamar, who's averaging 92 yards a game, and he's a Georgia commit. Valdosta is Valdosta is led by, pardon me, Tyreek Wade, who's a quarterback. He threw for 250 his last game. They're hand the ball well, and they're also led by running back Marquise Fennell, who's rushed for 16 touchdowns on the season. He's averaging 121.8 yards a game. So in this game, this is always a hard fought game. Colquitt and Valdosta had no love lost there, especially with Rush Probst being a coach at both schools. The hatred runs deep there. I think Valdosta's just got a little too much talent for Colquitt this region. I think Valdosta goes down the road in Moultrie and gets out of there with a 31-17 win this week. But that's going to be a really great game here. Probably might be the game of the week in Georgia, as well as having a lot of talent on the field there. So, what are we getting into on the college level, DMAC?
Kevin, you want to jump into Bobby Coleman some?
Yeah, I do, from Phoenix City. And first of all, that Phoenix City Auburn game is always a heated rivalry in Alabama. But I've watched Bobby Coleman the last 2 years at the Under Armour camp, and he's a really interesting quarterback to me. He's a shorter guy, about 5'9", 5'10", but really good arm, really accurate. And he's competed at their, with some guys that are 2 and 3 years older than him, and he's competed very well. So I really like Bobby Coleman. I think from a high school standpoint, he's a really good high school quarterback that can pass and run the ball. But again, I really like his accuracy. So I wouldn't be surprised if he leads Phoenix City all the way to the state championship in the state of Alabama this year. And I'm really interested to see if he can get an extra inch or two of growth. If he does, I think he can play in the SEC. Yeah, I'm a big Bobby Coleman fan. I think he's got a lot of talent.
So anybody have any final thoughts before we wrap this one up?
I'm looking forward to a great weekend of college football. It's a down week in the SEC, but there's some good football to be played. The biggest game for me is probably
this for me this week. It's kind of strange because it happens to fall all at the same time that the 3 schools that we cover out in our paper, LSU, Grambling, and Tech, are all on bye week this week. So we basically have nothing but high school going on this weekend. So, but still looking forward. I'll be covering Ruston and Stephenville, and Ruston's final swing of their Texas swing is their 6 games in 2 years against Texas teams. So we'll wrap that up, and that's what I'm looking forward to.
Sorry about that, guys. The game I wanted to bring up again was Miami at Florida State. That's going to be a great game in the ACC, with the winner having a leg up for the conference championship and certainly the playoffs. The winner of that game is probably, if Miami wins it, they're almost a shoe-in for the playoffs with the way their schedule shakes out. Florida State, if they get a win, it puts them in great contention for it. Like I said, I think that game is one that's going to be hotly contested. I think Florida State is ready, and I think that offensively they're just going to keep Miami off balance just enough to pull out a win in Tallahassee.
I'm looking forward to this weekend. These are the weekends that we always get some surprises, whether it's a Florida against a Texas. Sweet, you've mentioned Florida State, with the potential of beating Miami. I think I like Florida State, but we're going to get some upsets. Or again, DMAC, you called Vandy against Bama. So this is one of those weekends. I think if you think it's going to be just a boring weekend because there's not as many big games, I think you'll be disappointed, because I think we'll have some surprises somewhere out there. And again, college football always finds a way to pull us in, even on weekends where they don't have a lot going on. But speaking of teams you cover, Brian, what's your outlook on La Tech this year? I think that they're off to a pretty good start, and I think they can surprise some people. Defensively, they're very good.
Well, they really are, and I think the defense can carry them to a conference championship, actually, because I don't think Conference USA is very deep, and Tech's schedule is very favorable because they have all of the top teams playing in Ruston this year. Now, we did get some bad news this week. Former LSU player Kobe Fields blew out his ACL last week, so he's out for the season.
And he was playing really, really well.
Yeah, man. He actually blew his ACL out when he intercepted a pass in the end zone to stop a drive last week. So kind of fitting, that his last play of the year was him making a play and taking the ball away. So, but Tech, you mentioned their defense. They have 5 takeaways in 4 games. I'm sorry, 5 defensive touchdowns in 4
Wow.
games, the last 4 games. So it's incredible, that a lot of teams don't have 5 defensive touchdowns in the entire season.
That is correct.
LSU
Offen
doesn't have 5 offensive touchdowns in the past 4 games, so good for them.
Yeah, offense is still erratic. Don't know what to make of it. They may score 30 and a half and then get shut out the second half. That's actually happened. So I really don't know. But yeah, I do actually see them making conference championship game and as a dark horse to actually make the playoffs.
The Fighting Sonny Cumbies. Who'd have thought?
Yeah, who'd have thought?
But they're playing well, and I hate to hear that about Fields because he
Yeah.
might have been their best player on defense, and I mean that in a very
No,
complimentary manner because they have a good defense.
he was without a doubt the best player, but familiar face is stepping in to take over for him, and that's Jaden Mayfield, who was an All-State player at Ruston, who's in his redshirt freshman season this year, and they're moving him into the starting lineup. So we'll see what I know what Jaden can do, but we'll see what he can do on the college level.
Nice. My 3 wrap-up thoughts. The first one, I am just so thankful that LSU is not playing this week. After my trip from Oxford, I need a week off of LSU football. Second, geez, I don't know where I was going with number 2. Oh, number 2, Oklahoma football. Jade Knott had a really good week of practice in their bye week last week, so I expect him to get things going on the ground a little bit against Kent State this week. And then number 3, ready to watch Diego Pavia get a win in Tuscaloosa this week.
Man, he's averaging 49.5 points a game, so that could happen. And certainly LSU needed that week off too. As much as you're happy, trust me, I think that staff and that offense is absolutely ready for a bye week also.
If there's a team that needs a reset, LSU is it.
Yes.
Well, guys, that's all from Southern Sports Gumbo tonight. Make sure you like, share, follow, send this to everybody you know so that we can all retire here soon. We'll see you guys next time.
Have a great football weekend.